Hello and welcome to another Which Bookie racing preview. We are back for day 2 of the Dublin Racing Festival. Again, myself and Will are trying to get this out as early as possible. We've got final declaration through. More importantly, we've got some rider information through too. That was a big talking point for the Irish Cheltmental, which we will come on to. At the time that this video is going out, you can go back and check our day 1 video for Saturday's best bets of the Dublin Racing Festival. Talk about it in there, but I'll remind you guys here in the description of this video, there will be a link to the Which Bookie Daily Tips site. You can click that to find what we already fancy, or on the day of the racing, when the bets get updated, you can find out what we fancy on there. So nice and early, Will. It's just after 11 o'clock. Some markets have already been priced up. This is obviously very beneficial because talking about betting, we need to know where the prices are at as well. I touched on the fact that we've had rider information in there, touched on the Irish Champion Hurdle, which we will come on to later, but it's really exciting these 2 days. I'm giddy to get going in here. So have you had a good chance to get through the card and you think you've got a few fancies for us?
Yeah, I think so. We talked about Saturday, didn't we? Yesterday, of course, and that's yet to play out. But there were definitely in my mind when looking at the cards at the start of the week and sort of entering towards the declaration stage. Sunday looked to be the day where I was probably more able to certainly find some angles. So yeah, let's hope that plays out.
Lovely. Well, no pressure and you set yourself up for that one, but we'll crack on with the opening race, which is a mares handicap hurdle. It's over 2 miles, 2 furlongs. I mean, it doesn't need to be talked about, but I'll just mention that Dysart Enos obviously was entered for an Irish Champion Hurdle. They had her entered in here. I thought that might be a smart play. I think she goes to the Kingwell, but we do have a British raider coming in here. Queen's Gamble. Maybe Harry Derham and Fergal O'Brien have been speaking, and Fergal thought, I don't want to go near this one because it's going to absolutely hose up. But Queen's Gamble's head of the market 3-1. Revised markets open with Bet365. I think Paddy Power 2, they're 100-30. It's 9-2 straight home behind. Quilimita is 6-1, 11-2 in some places, and then it's sort of double figures or bigger the field. We've got last year's winner Brucio in here. Will, I'll let you go first on this one because I'll allude to the one that I fancy. We've obviously talked a little bit beforehand, but it's a good race, this one. It's nice to see that there's a big prize money handicap for the girls as well, and especially about this sort of trip. Quite a lot of big handicaps seem to be at 2 miles or 2.5. Perfect trip. Real good race. We've got 20 runners to go at. So who was catching your eye?
Yeah, it's from a betting perspective, not particularly original or exciting in terms of a price anyway. But if you'd have asked me at the start of the week, or perhaps at the stage where the entries were initially made, if I'd gone through all of the cards at that stage and you had to ask me for one horse that I was going to be potentially backing and thought would be very, very hard to beat at a reasonable price, it would be Queen's Gamble in this race. It's not normally my style to really be particularly strong on the head of the market. It's my natural inclination is to try and look away from that and try and take on the market leader. But I think if you can get 100-30, 7-2, even edging slightly bigger if possible about Queen's Gamble, I think that would still be a decent price for me, because she's just the absolute class act in the field. That classic cliche, a graded horse in a handicap. She's very, very good. I mean, as a bumper horse, she was very, very highly rated when trained by Oliver Sherwood. Obviously joined Harry Derham, been fairly lightly campaigned, but her run in the Jerry Fielden was a massive run as well. That's a race that was good on the clock, and it's worked out well since then. And I think if you could devise a particular set of conditions in terms of track, trip, and likely ground, I thought that 2 miles 2 around Leopardstown on soft ground is absolutely bang on for Queen's Gamble. I know she's quite a nice mover and she's been kept to fairly decent ground for the most part, but I think she handles soft ground fine. And I think she is just the class act in this field. I've tried to, whenever that happens and I do fancy the favourite, I look down the list and I try and think, well, okay, if is she making the market for something else here? And is there ones at bigger prices? And there weren't too many that jumped out at me, actually. I think she goes really close to winning here. And Harry Derham, of course, won a valuable 2 mile handicap hurdle back at Ferryhouse with Washington, didn't he? So he's probably had his red marker pen out for this race for a while and circled it in the calendar for Queen's Gamble. So I'm not looking too far beyond her, I must admit.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I've mentioned Dysart Enos before. Obviously, that listed bumper at Market Raising, I think it was. I think she was beaten by Dysart Enos, but she was given £4 that day, Queen's Gamble. So even on going back to that form, like her official rating of 134 is definitely definitely a winnable mark, or definitely a workable mark, isn't it? The one that I like, Will, which is why I've gone for the double green clothing for the episode, is one at a big price in it. I fully respect Queen's Gamble. I do think that she's a like well handicapped horse. I think she's better than her mark, but I think there potentially is another one in here that is better than her mark. I say potentially. I'm confident this one is, but she is a bit of a lunatic. Dare I say most of the mares can be, but it's Lily de Burley. The Connections won this race last year. It was Brucio that Munir and Suede had that won the race. Same trainer again, Sandy Crawford. They've got Brucio in this race again. The last few times that horse has been ridden by Ben Bromley, though. So I was looking at Lily de Burley last season. She was in a mare's handicap hurdle where the fixture was abandoned, the bane of all betting when fixtures get abandoned and horses miss their target. They then run her next time in just a novice hurdle, I think it was. She did go and win, and then she won a weak enough handicap at Kelso the time after. But I felt like they unfortunately had a pot left behind. It was probably like 30k, I think, the race for that mare's one. But I'm just convinced that she's got plenty of back form to suggest that she's got to be a 130s horse. She is like 9 now, so time's passing on. But I think they've had this a long time in the making. 2 runs this season. Obviously, you need to be able to forgive horses when they're sort of out of sorts, but they've run her twice without the hood on. She's been racing with the hood ever since she had one bumper start, then they put the hood on. So she's had a hood and tongue tie combination basically throughout her career. 2 runs this season, they didn't do that. Once at Haydock, she was only sent off 7-2. She ran behind that road less travelled enough into it, but then just gave up when things started to go. And I think that's the attitude of a horse that needs a hood. When the things got tough, she just decided she wanted to shirk and do something else. That was under Brian Hayes, John Doe Slevin, and then obviously Daryl Jacob for the Munir and Suede outfit had been riding before. Then Sean Flanagan rode the horse at Doncaster. That was the race where Altabelli jumped really weird, stayed on really late to pick up, or nearly pick up Jungle Jack. Of course, he's come out and won since. But Lily de Burley was messing about a bit at the back at the start. They had the guy with the whip as well to make sure that she went off. And it just looked very important for her to go out and get a run that day. But again, the jockey switch and stuff it just looked like they weren't 100% trying that day. So as much as she was like a 12-1 poke there, and she obviously wasn't going to do anything in that particular race, the fact she's now 40-1 for this race, when I think she should be more like I dare I say single figures, like an 8-1 or 10-1 poke in here. She's been dropped £5 for that Doncaster run as well, which is just impressive. I love the fact of that. She's definitely better than her mark. Now, obviously, the attitude's the slight concern with it. But when they're 40-1, you don't have to make too much of a case to fancy him anyway. But John Joe Slevin's been booked back on. The hood's been reapplied. So everything that you'd sort of want to happen if it was a plot and they were in fact targeting this race is happening. Like if I'd seen John Joe Slevin on Brucio, I would have thought to myself, well, maybe I've just got this one completely wrong. So 40-1 now, they've got the revised markets. It is only 4 places up for grabs in a 20-runner race, and she is a bit of a rogue, but you don't have to have too much on to make a fair profit off of her. I think she's going to get well found, and I think she's going to be well supported. I would draw the line. Like I said, I think she probably could be like an 8, 10s, 12s poke. If she was that far down, I'd be betting her, but I'd be having like a little bit less on. But at 40-1, I'm having a reasonable swing on her, and she will remain in the column because I can't imagine that by Sunday she's going to get down to the sorts of prices that I think she should be at. But like I say, fully respect Queen's Gamble, but we could get Lily de Burley to come second and we could both be winners in this race. Well, I think she's a cracking bet at that price. Like I said, I'd bet her at shorter, so I'll just have to stop there. Otherwise, I'll just keep saying how much I like her. I think she's got a proper chance.
If you go, when you're putting up a selection, if you fancy a horse, if you can convince yourself that you'd bet them at shorter than it is, that to me is, that's a bet.
Absolutely. And it's tricky with some of these as well, because I try and run scenarios in my head, but obviously I know she could be a little bit roguey, but since she's been in the hood, and especially when John Joe rides her, they've got such a good combination. The only possible negative I see is the fact that she has been switched about with jockeys, and maybe she decides, actually, I don't want you to be back on. She throws her toys out the pram because of that. But they would have been riding at home. They'd have been doing all sorts of stuff to get ready for this. I think there's just so many green flags. I can't see how she doesn't go close. But obviously, again, gamble responsibly, make your own decisions. Right, we will move on to the second race. One of the Sunday's racing is banging anyway, Will, but this is one of the more anticipated races in the fact that we've got Ballyburn, obviously beaten by Sergino, now stepping up in trip. This is a trip that we know that he'll be able to get, having won a Ballymore. So he'll be fine at this, jumping and those sorts of things. We'll learn a lot more about him. But it's even better now because Imperial Pass hasn't gone to the Scilly Isles. So we've got the previous Ballymore winner going against him. And as much as he's had his season in open hurdling company last year, they are the same age, which is probably prudent to remember. They've got Champ Kine in here for Willie Mullins, but Willie Mullins will be running multiple horses. But better days ahead for Gordon Elliott as well as in this race, as well as Croke Park. So I think there's some depth in here. It's not quite the cakewalk that it might have looked like it could have been for Ballyburn had Impere Pass not been in it. But I think there is some depth in behind. So how do you see this one panning out? Like Ballyburn, I guess is like obviously should be favourite for this race, but would you make him an odds-on shot against this field?
Yeah, I think I would. Yeah, I think what he did against Sergino, I think because beforehand, when we get these horses that are unbeaten and there's this groundswell of popularity about them, as soon as they're beaten, suddenly that mystique seems to go in, from the general public. We've seen a little bit of invincibility or lack of invincibility with Constitution Hill, and suddenly there was that wondering about him, wasn't there? That is he quite as good as he used to be? Was he that good anyway, etc., etc. That's been sort of brushed under the carpet a fair deal now, hasn't it? Similar with Lossiemouth as well, when she was beaten by Constitution Hill. So, and I think that's the case with Ballyburn here, in that he's not flown under the radar going into this race by any stretch, because he is odds on. But that was still a mighty run behind Sergino. I mean, Sergino is, a potential Sprinter Sacra type horse, for me, on what he's done so far. And nothing that Nicky Henderson and Nico de Boinville say about him dissuades me from that opinion. So for Ballyburn to be able to, to go that tempo with him and at least get him under some kind of pressure, it wasn't much, but some kind of pressure around Kempton, 2 miles on decent ground, the inherent ability Ballyburn has got. Because I think if you could devise a race for him trip-wise and ground, it would probably be this particular test, sort of mid-range-ish, slight bit of dig in the ground, left-handed track around Leopardstown, perfect for Ballyburn. So, I think he'll be mightily tough to beat. I don't think he will get beat. But I do think that Impere Pass, for all that he was good, or he has been good so far over fences, he's never one that's seemingly taken to Leopardstown. I know he's running Irish Champion hurdles and run behind State Man, but he just never seems to quite take to the place. I don't know what it is, whether it's just more by fault than design, if you will. But I do think the Gordon Elliott pair, given that Champ Kiley has had a long time off the track and had one start, there's that potential bounce factor. If you're looking in those sort of different markets, without Ballyburn, I thought the Gordon Elliott pair, Croke Park and Better Days Ahead, they fought out the Grade 1 at Christmas time. They've both been sort of sneakily under the radar in regards how they have performed over fences, particularly Croke Park, actually. Dual Grade 1 winner now. I don't think if you'd have asked Gordon Elliott that at the start of the season, that by February he'd be a dual Grade 1 winning chaser, he'd have probably laughed at you. But that's horses, they can develop. There's not much between them, obviously, on their running at Christmas time. And I think that as a form line and what they did on the clock is right up there with Impere Pass and Champ Kiley, if not slightly better. So I'd probably be looking to play those two in the market without Ballyburn, I think, because they'll be right in there for the places.
I like that. It's a good race, and the trip wise, like you touched on, Finn, like the perfect makeup for Ballyburn. He was so impressive at this meeting last year when he slammed Slade Steel, wasn't he? Obviously, the Turners' conditions have changed this year. It's no longer that race, and that's where I think he would have been heading. I think it would have been very obvious that that's the trip, because he can win at 2 miles, he could win at 3, but that would be the typical Willie Mullins stepping stone, wouldn't it? Like with a Valtor or like with a Galopin de Champs. So he's not being forced, because obviously horses, they're not going to do anything they don't want to do, but he's sort of being forced into the Brown Advisory now, because they first preference clearly was to try and go for an Arkle, otherwise they wouldn't have sent him to Kempton. So I'm not saying it's an afterthought, because Gaelic Warrior was favourite for a Stairs Hurdle last year before he won an Arkle. Willie Mullins likes to find out about his horses. I don't know how much more we're going to find out about him in this race, because he should just be better than all of these at this distance, trip and on the ground. I guess for me, I just want to find out how well he jumps, I guess, because he jumped fine at Kempton, he jumped fine on debut, but it is just that it's going to be a little bit more of an informative mission, I think. He's 4-6 with Bet365, he's 4-7 with some other firms. There is 4-5 still shown on William Hill. I don't know if that's there, but I'd say anything real close to even money would look like a bet. If he's more like closer to 1-2, which is where I think he would be, I would leave him alone. I mean, you can put him in muggy acres and those sorts of things. I think you'll learn more from watching it. The one I'm going to keep an eye on, I wouldn't bet, but it's better days ahead, because I think he, at 3 miles, especially the testing 3 miles of the Brown Advisory, he'll reverse that form with Croke Park from Christmas. And I want to see him get close enough to Ballyburn, or see how well he travels with him in this race, to understand whether I think he still could go and beat a Ballyburn in the Brown Advisory. So I think this is an informative watch for me rather than a betting race. But we've got so much depth in here that this race will stand up. Like what happens in here, what we find out after, whichever horses run well in here, I think is going to stand the test of time for sort of all the spring festivals, because we've got Punchestown, Fairy House, Aintree as well for the middle trips if people want to swerve Cheltenham, which some of these horses might do, mightn't they?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Whoa, what a day's racing, eh? Right, we'll move on to... We'll move on to the novices hurdle, Grade 1. This is a really interesting race in the fact that Copec de Boards, like, I guess, could go Supreme, could go Turners, but I think people are thinking he's maybe going to step up in trip. Almost a theme of Willie Mullins horses this season. I'm going to do some data into this, because I feel like a lot of Willie Mullins novice hurdlers this season, people have said, oh, his jumping's a bit iffy, which wouldn't necessarily be the norm. I wouldn't think year in, year out. I can't remember everyone saying Willie's novices don't seem to be able to jump, but it could just be that it's the big names that are maybe making a few mistakes. And maybe I'm being really harsh, because lots of these are having their first starts over hurdles and making mistakes. But Copec de Board has made a few mistakes. He's heading the market here. He's as short as 8 to 11 with some firms. Cade Doffy runs for Willie Mullins as well. He was a little bit weak in the week, and I wasn't sure whether he'd actually come here, but he is. Mark Walsh has dropped up. He's 4 to 1. We've got Blue Devassi for Gordon Elliott and Gigginstown. He looks a proper horse as well. He's 3 to 1, 4 to 1 with Bet365. And then it is 9 to 1 or bigger for Old Man Redemption Day, who's no longer running in bumpers, is he? So there's his chance probably gone. But it looks a really fascinating and informative race, I think, in the fact of, like last year when Ballyburn slapped up Slade Still, you look at them and just think that sorts out the pecking order of them, and then I guess the winner can go and pick and choose what race they want to go and win. Willie's obviously talked so much about Salvatore Mundi being fine for a Supreme, that's where he's going. Do you feel like Copec de Board and K. Doffy, the winner of this, would go for a Turners rather than being like a Supreme horse like last year, and then maybe the runner-up again like last year with Slade Still would be the Supreme horse maybe? And if that is the case, do you think Copec de Board and K. Doffy could be the answer to both those races?
Well, it's a possibility. It is a possibility. I think Copec de Board, if you had a flat race over, let's say, 2.25 miles between all of these horses that we're talking about for the novice hurdles, I think he'd probably be the winner of that. I think pure engine-wise, to be able to still win at Christmas time in the manner that he did, when he literally kicked every hurdle out of the way. I mean, he didn't jump one fluently. And to beat a horse of the caliber of Kawabunga, who we saw win a very well-run race last weekend at Fairy House, and I think is a very good horse, live player for the Turners, that one. William Money is a good horse who was back in second. The horse of Henry de Bromheads, who was in third that day, Cocktail Divin, I think is a very good horse as well, and he couldn't go with them. So I think Copec de Board is the best of them. It's just whether he jumps, because this will be deeper, obviously. This will be tougher again for him. There's some good horses in here. Cade Doffy, obviously. I think he's probably more of a long-term project, potentially, Cade Doffy. And Bleu de Vassy has done not a huge amount wrong. I mean, he was 7 or 8 lengths behind stablemate Romeo Coolio at Christmas time. But I just wonder whether that actually might be, at this stage, the level of form that sets the standard there. Because Romeo Coolio, I think, is rock solid for the Supreme. He'll be in the 3 or 4 in the Supreme without a shadow of a doubt for me. And it's whether Bleu de Vassy, in being a little bit inferior to him, is that going to be good enough for him to get over the Grade 1 threshold today, but then be beaten come the springtime? Maybe that could be a possibility. And I think it'd be an each-way price here. Definitely Bleu de Vassy. And the other one at a wild price, or a lot bigger price, who was sent off, single-figure prices for that race won by Romeo Coolio, is Carnique, who, if you remember back, he made a Horlicks of a blunder at the second hurdle. He was down on his haunches, nearly capsized. Patrick Mullins was up over his neck. He dropped back through the field. But he was thought, good enough to go off 11 to 2, 5 to 1 against Romeo Coolio that day. Might be that they've sort of taken their medicine and they're going to think, right, we'll pitch him into this, get him a handicap mark, maybe go into some of those races further down the line. But that's probably not to be forgotten. That Grade 1 form at Christmas time doesn't seem to be the way the market is thinking about this race at the minute, which I thought was interesting. And I might try and, use that angle into the race with the likes of Bleu de Vassy or potentially at a wild price Carniquet.
Oh, I like that. Now, it's interesting when you talked about Carniquet, because we talked about a few horses in yesterday's video that could be potential bets for Cheltenham. As you were saying, that Carniquet's had the 4 spins over hurdle, so this would be the 5th, wouldn't it? And we remember Saint-Ouen fell, didn't he, when he was going to be the one for the Supreme, and then they thought, let's just go win a county. And then State Man did the same, fell, and then they went and won a county. Carniquet's had the 4 spins. This would be the 5th. He's 12 to 1 for a county hurdle at this stage. So obviously the 50s that he is in here is probably more relevant of the fact that they're maybe not trying in this race as much as they might do somewhere else. But it would be very Willie Mullins, wouldn't it, to have a horse that he thinks is a potential supreme contender that for whatever reason makes a mistake that costs them a race and then goes to something else. So that's a hell of a shout.
He could even be one for the Martin Pipe, because I think in time he'll be a stayer. So, and these colours have often angled a lot of horses towards the Martin Pipe, haven't they?
They have, rather than going there. That's very true. Well, anyway, there's some non-runner money back markets as well. Bet365 have priced up all of those. Hills have done the same as well. So whichever way you want to play it, it's definitely worth looking at Carniquet for a future, I reckon. As far as this goes, Copec de Board, I'm looking again very much like the previous race. I'm looking at this more as a fact finder mission. Bleu de Vassy, I know you were saying about maybe being each way priced, but he's 4 to 1 with Bet365. He's 3 to 1 with other firms. So I don't know how they're going to make this market, but I don't think any of the top 3, by the way the bookies are pricing, are going to be bigger than 5 to 1. I think they're going to have them all fairly short. So it's going to be tight enough. I think Copec de Board, it's just his jumping worries me a tiny bit. And for that reason, I wouldn't want to pile into him. But like you say, if it was a flat race, I think he's the winner of it. There's an interesting one as well in Musselburgh on Sunday. There's this, I think it's the Scottish Supreme, Clap of Thunder for Nigel Twiston-Davies that I was expecting to be quite a good horse, runs there. He was second to this horse in that sort of sales bump at the back end of last year, wasn't he? So you could be a little double across them two across the 2 days. But yeah, this would be one as a watching brief for me, I think. But I'm just excited to find out the pecking order of the horses and where they might go after. Like I say, I'm being very harsh on a lot of the Willie Mullins horses, but like Jasmine de Grugy, I forgave that horse for his jumping debut. I thought he's obviously got the engine, and then when he ran in the Lawlers and Ace, he jumped even worse. So as much as you'd expect horses to improve with their races, Copec de Board did make a lot of mistakes, but that's just tempering my enthusiasm to bet him as opposed to thinking that I'd want to take him on, I suppose. Right, we will move on, Will, to the Dublin Chase. This, it used to be a different race before. I should really know the name of this, but this got taken over. There was a grade 2 that used to get run around this time of the year as well, didn't there? And then they brought the Dublin Chase as a grade 1. It's been a bit of a pointer towards the Champion Chase, but it's also been a bit of a graveyard for horses that have gone and won this and then gone and try and run in a Champion Chase. I mean, we've had Defi de Sil that was beat at 2 to 9, haven't we? But we've had horses in the past in this that have gone to run at Cheltenham, namely El Fabiolo last year that won it, that go off long odds on and go and get beat. So maybe you don't want to win this race. Put the Kettle on was beat, wouldn't she? And then she went and won a Champion Chase. But we've got a very good lineup in terms of the Irish 2-milers that are in there. I know people might argue that a Nergamine could go in here, but I guess we kind of seen what he did last time out in Ascot, which I think was more informative. This is good because we've got Gaelic Warrior in here as an 8 to 11 favourite. Marine Nationale in second, who ran pretty well at Christmas, I thought, on the wrong side of the track, but maybe it's because he had his ground again. I think he does need nicer ground, but he's 4 to 1 in here. El Fabiolo's coming back, so you have to question what level he's going to come back at, but he's in as big as 8 to 1 for this race, which seems mad. Solness that did win over Christmas is a short 6 to 1. 8 to 1 is the biggest price for that one. Then we've got Quilixios, Gentleman Demi, Captain Guinness, Sanicha. So, Will, this is a proper race as far as I'm concerned. Gaelic Warrior was weak at Christmas, wasn't he? Ran, I guess, an okay race in second, given the fact that there was a bit of the market weakness. Him and the winner both stayed on the outside of the track all the way around. They were definitely on the better part of the ground as far as I'm concerned. So I'd upgrade what Marine Nationale did, but as I touched on, I think it was probably also the fact that he had the better ground. He's clearly got some sort of breathing issue, which worries me for horses if it decides that it's going to come back. But then when you look at someone like Gaelic Warrior being an 8 to 11 poke, would you have the confidence that he's going to go and get the job done here? Because I know he's won left-handed at Cheltenham, and I know that he's maybe dispelled that myth, but he wasn't great when he ran against Fatafal at this meeting last year. I know that was only a 2-horse race. He jumped really straight that day as well, and I expected him to go quite well, but he just didn't seem to be at the races that day. Do you think he warrants being 8 to 11, or do you think that he's probably opposable?
I think he's opposable. Look, he again, if this was a flat race over 2 miles, he's probably the best of them. I think on what we've seen in terms of his raw ability, definitely. But there is just one or two kinks there, isn't there, with regards to Gaelic Warrior? Look, it all clicked at Cheltenham in the Arkle last year. He had his ground. He had a great ride, had a nice tempo to aim at. Paul Townend kept a horse on his right-hand side. So he jumped straight enough, and he did edge a little bit right that day, but nothing untoward. And Leopardstown's chase track often, actually, because as you mentioned, sometimes you want to be out wider on the track anyway. If you jump right, it's not too much of a problem because you're just going towards the better ground a lot of the time. So I don't think that's hugely a problem. But he does chuck in the odd stinker every now and again. Hard to predict when that is. Tongue tie goes on, which is, I think Willie Mullins is doing that with a lot of his horses recently in an effort to try and settle them. It used to be something Paul Nicholls did a couple of seasons ago as well. I don't think it designates a particular breathing issue as such. It might, but I wouldn't be too perturbed about that. I think he's just trying to get him to settle away and run his race. So, at the time of the race at Christmas time, won by Solness, it wasn't astronomically good. Solness stole that race, I think, and great ride from the front end. But there is one in here who has beaten Solness this year comfortably, beaten Marine Nationale this year comfortably, who's 14 to 1, 16 to 1, and it's Quilixios, who I think if Henry de Bromhead had a good week or two, he'd be a single figure price in here, wouldn't he? That what he's done in his 2 chase starts this year, he's 8 lengths off John Bon at Sandown. Does that not represent the best piece of form on offer that any of these can bring into this at this stage? I think it does. I genuinely think it does. There's potential for Gaelic Warrior to improve past that. There's potential for El Fabiolo to come back to the form that he had showed. But right here, right now, on his 2 runs this season, I think Quilixios sets the standard. And he's 14 to 1, 16 to 1. So if Henry de Bromhead horses, if they run well on Saturday, and if a few of them run up to form, I'm hoping there's still double figure prices there at that stage for Quilixios, because I think he's a rock solid each way play if he runs to form.
Yeah, that's fair. And there's 3 places up for grabs. Strangely, we've got 8 runners, but a couple of the firms are only betting 2 betting. So it sort of dignifies the fact that their prices maybe need to be updated, or their markets do need to a little bit. But with the markets that have got 3 places, you can get 16 to 1 top price Quilixios. He's 12 to 1 shortest price in there. So still very much an each way price. I in this race, I fully accept that Gaelic Warrior on his day is a very, very, very good horse. There's just been so many times in his career where he's just not run to the level that we know that he's capable of doing. And unfortunately, he's done it more often than not, which is the frustrating thing with a horse like this, especially at any of these sorts of prices. So my inclination with him in most instances is to try and find something to take him on. Went for Dino Blue over Christmas, didn't quite pan out. She seems to have some sort of wind issue because I thought she was there with a chance, maybe on the wrong bit of the track, but not really making an excuse for her. I just think with Gaelic Warrior that all they're going to be thinking about is Cheltenham. And I this, again, with the tongue tie that's going on there, obviously in Ireland they don't have to disclose if they've had wind surgery, whereas over here we would normally see if that is the case. I feel that there's a few horses that are running over the weekend. We'll talk about another one a little bit later on where they're messing about with headgear and they're trying things out. So I don't think they'll be too perturbed if Gaelic Warrior ever gets beat in his career, because he's been beaten so many times in the past. It was the same at Christmas. They were happy to not have him fully wound up to go and win. I think this is just a stepping stone for him to go and run well in Cheltenham. So I respect that he could obviously go and win this. But I cannot believe that El Fabiolo is 6 to 1. I can't believe he's not even second favourite for this. Like I say, he was 2 to 9 to win a champion chase last year. And I know that's because John Bon wasn't there. But if John Bon had been going, he would have been a lot shorter for the race. He's 175 officially rated. He's run multiple times in the 170s. And every time he's run at the start of the season, he's won. So as much as he's had an issue, potentially in that Sandown race where John Bon beat him, and it was a performance that would make you say, well, I don't think John Bon would ever lose to El Fabiolo again. I know people have said the question marks about Cheltenham, but he's not been seen since. So it could be that something went awry in that race for El Fabiolo. That might not have been 100% El Fabiolo, and he still got within 4 lengths of him. And I know what you're saying about Quilixios getting seconds to John Bon, but that was 8 lengths second to John Bon at his favourite Sandown as well. El Fabiolo, 3 places with the dead 8 at 6 to 1. If he's not in the first 3, then that may be the last time we ever see him race, because even if he comes back at I know we say this 90% and all those types of things. Like he's got to be close to being sort of back to his best, but there would be other options they could have potentially shoved him in, like grade 2s or something, if they wanted to do it. And I know this might be a stepping stone to decide if they go to a Ryanair or anything like that, but I think that's all rubbish talk. I think he's a 2-miler. I think he's got a live chance in a champion chase, especially to run into a place when he's a big price for that. And I think the 6-1 about him for this just looks stupid. Like if El Fabiola wins this Dublin chase after hacking up in it last year when he was 1-3, and he goes off at 6-1, people will look back and just think, I am an absolute idiot. So I don't want to be that idiot. I like El Fabiola. Whether that price sticks around or not, I don't know. And if he does stay about that sort of price, I wouldn't look at it as a weakness. I would just think that maybe recency bias, people are trying to oppose him for whatever reason. I'll do a bit more work on why he's been off, because I'll be honest, I'm ignorant to the fact that whether he's had like a major issue or any of those types of things. But I trust Willie Mullins to get him back. And I'm wearing the double green, so we might as well just tip every one of JJ Slevin's rides. But he just looks grossly overpriced. There's another one that's grossly overpriced, which we're going to come on to in a sec as well. Right, done for the Dublin chase, I think there, Will?
Yep, all done.
Perfect. Right, we'll move on to the grade 3 handicap chase. This is a nice race. James de Burley's favourite in here, another double green. Back to normal, 6-1, sort of vying for favouritism. Pinkerton, 6-1, as big as 13-2. Sequestered is 8-1. Monbeg Park is 10s. Search for Glory's 10s as well. And then it is sort of double figures or bigger the rest. But you've only got 4 horses in here that are 33-1 or bigger. It looks a pretty open handicap chase in here, Will. So was there anyone that you had on your like sort of radar for this before confirmations that has been confirmed, or is it one that you've sort of whittled down after?
A bit of both to some degree. Don't like James de Burley at the prices. He just never finds off the bridle. I was a big supporter of him, I think in this race last year and then in the Topham chase, and he just doesn't get home. I mean, Paul Townend tried to nurse him to win the Topham chase at Aintree Grand National Festival, and he just can't find that extra off the bridle, sadly. So pass him over as a result of that. I think there's a few interesting horses at a lot bigger prices. I don't know whether today's the day with them or whether they've got plans further down the line in the spring. My hunch would say that that's the case for later on. The likes of Herence Dairy and Henry de Bromhead's Life in the Park as well. They've both got this type of race in them on their best day. It's just hard to know whether that is going to be Sunday or not. But the one that I think will probably be a bet for me if he stays around the right or the same kind of price is Search for Glory for Gordon Elliott and Sam Ewing. The horse, he's only had 3 chase starts, but Gordon's so good with this when he has lightly raced novice chasers who he pitches into handicaps. And I bet he couldn't believe that the marquee was given 144 for what he's actually done. Well, firstly, what he did over hurdles. You know, he was good in graded races over hurdles. He won his chase debut at Galway in decent fashion. Now, he was obviously second in that 3-runner Jigginstown event, the Grade 2 Florida Pearl behind Stella Story, but he was just outstayed by Stella Story that day. And he ran a belter in the Grade 1 at Limerick at Christmas time behind Ampere Pass and Jordan's, who I think is a sneakily good horse as well. And again, he travelled with some effervescence that day. I think inherently they have tried him over 3 miles on a few occasions, but I think he's a quicker, better horse than that. So this 2 mile, just shy of 3/4 miles around Leopardstown on ground that should be around about yielding, you would imagine. I think it could be perfect for Search for Glory. And it's interesting, he's had all kinds of entries over the last few weeks, and Gordon's chose this race, in a handicap, 80,000 euros to the winner. I think he's thought, this is a good horse here. Let's give him a go in a handicap off a rating that we think is less than he should be on.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And like I touched on yesterday's video, but there's a lot of prize money that is on offer. These are very much target races in their own right. I think in the last decade, Empire of Dirt won this and then went and won the plate at Cheltenham, but nothing else has. And I think a lot of the horses haven't even gone to Cheltenham after either. So a lot of them are being targeted for this race specifically. It isn't one that really got me excited when I saw the entries for it. I'll be honest. I felt like it was quite competitive, and it was one of those where I started to go through the runners and I just felt like I had more cons to every horse than I could find positives. And as much as I like to try and sell a story of a horse, I wouldn't have a strong, confident fancy in him at all. The one that I started to try and make a case for, which is why I abruptly stopped was Chantrose, because I backed this horse in the past, still a novice over fences. It's had 10 goes and it still hasn't won. I think it was 2 from 4 over hurdles. I actually thought it was like an Albert Bartlett type back in the good old days. But I feel like this horse has got the ability to go and do something, but the jumping is bad. Fell early last time out as well. He's one of these horses that I can imagine watching the racing this weekend and seeing him going halfway around the race, not making a mistake, thinking, I knew he would go and win this, but also knowing full well that you only know that because it's, again, hindsight type stuff. But they took the race last year, didn't they, with Hartwood? I know, Henry, you mentioned it as well, that the horses aren't necessarily like flying at the moment, but he's got a good few chances. Rachel's got like a real decent book of rides, and all it takes is for them to get a little bit of confidence going, and you could potentially see a different result. So that'll be one that was like semi on my radar, but that's not the sort of horse that would be going in the tipping column. It might be the one that I might have a couple of quid each way just for interest. Now, Will, we're moving on to, I think, the best race of the entire weekend, regardless of the fact that Brighter Days Ahead doesn't go here, because I don't think that really matters. There was a chance that Lossiemouth was going to go to the International, and if Lossiemouth had gone there and Brighter Days Ahead hadn't come here, well, we wouldn't be finding anything out, I suppose, because it would just be Stateman taking on the rest of Willie Mullins' yard, and we wouldn't find anything out. But we've still got a similar kind of race, I guess, except it will be more informative because it's Lossiemouth versus Stateman. Lots of talk in the week, people saying who would Paul Townend ride. Obviously, we know that he's chosen Stateman, but before I talk a little bit more about it, in the week, especially after seeing the prices and those things in there, who did you think that Paul was going to ride?
I must admit, I thought Lossiemouth.
Oh, okay. Because I was relatively confident. Well, I thought in my mind he would ride Stateman, being like the reigning winner of this race, the reigning champion hurdler. Even when he ran behind Constitution, no one got beat in that champion hurdle. He just said he wasn't right that day. And obviously last time just was well and truly beaten. But still think he is their number one champion hurdle horse, even though the market wouldn't have that to suggest it. So I'm glad he got booked up, because I was getting excited and I was thinking, well, the bookies have just got this wrong. And I saw the 7-4 about him in the week, and I would admit that I had a few quid on, but it was risky because you don't know who he's going to choose. But he's chosen Stateman, and the market's the same, Will. It's still 7-4 Stateman. It's actually shortened up a bit for Lossiemouth. She's 8-15 for the race, 12-1 Winter Fog, 25-1 Daily Long Legs, and then Phil Dudery, that keeps going around picking up prize money, is the only non-Willie Mullins horse that's in it. But I can't believe the price of Stateman, basically, the long and the short of all of this. And then where, obviously, you've got to think the horse has got to have a chance in a race, and I think it's very obvious to say why Stateman would have a chance at 2 miles in an Irish champion hurdle, considering he's just been slapping them up. It's almost like if you're doing a heads or tails, I guess, like a coin flip, and someone offers you 2-1 on either heads or tails. Even if you thought it was going to be tails, you've probably got to take the 2-1 that they're offering on the other option, because you know it's the right thing to do. So that's where my head sits with this. Like, I know the Lossiemouth run behind Constitution Hill. People were saying, "Oh, I knew after the first hurdle that she was beat." That's a load of absolute rubbish. And I don't even care if Willie Mullins has said it. Nobody thought after she set off that she couldn't win the race. It was too early to tell. You might have had concerns, like when Salvatore Mundi pulled at the start of the race. You might think, "Oh, well, he won't settle," but it doesn't mean that they can't go and win the race. And she's run well behind Constitution Hill, which is fine. But she was the same behind Tiapu as well. She was really keen in that race. They went a dawdle, turned into a bit of a sprint, and she beat Tiapu over 2.5 miles, which I think is a trip. I think she is better over 2.5. And Willie said about the fact that they've, raced her to try and make her settle. Well, it's obviously not worked, has it? Because she went in Kempton behind Burdett Road that was going up the clappers, and apparently she was still too keen in there. So with Willie Mullins having horses here, and obviously it's not the be all and end all of it, he's got 4 horses in it. So the worst case scenario for Willie Mullins as a trainer is he wins this race. It doesn't matter who he wins it with, they're going to win this race. Owners obviously want to have their big day. This is a big race to go and win. Paul Townend will want to go and pick up the ride on this, but they've got options when it comes to March, haven't they? So Stateman, really, if he doesn't win this and gets beat by Lossiemouth, you'd question if he could beat her again in Cheltenham. So this is his time to shine. Whereas if Lossiemouth is beat, you'd say, well, all right, you might not be able to beat Stateman or Constitution Hill, so just go in the mares and have a crack at Brighter Days Ahead. So she has got a sort of plan B type scenario. So I think tactically with Stateman, he's pretty easy to ride. Last time something went out like the clappers, didn't it? King of Kingsfield and Brighter Days Ahead. Willie Mullins is controlling this race. No one's going to do the same again. And all the other races where it's just a normal, typical tempo, I know he headed Brighter Days Ahead and I did not expect her to fight back, but she is like a better horse than Lossiemouth on what she's done this season, and she could be very, very special. Like, she's already putting up numbers that are on a par with Honeysuckle, who's going and winning champion hurdles. So it's no disgrace that he's been beaten by Constitution Hill and he's been beaten by a phenomenal mare. So yeah. I cannot believe he's the price, even more so now that Paul Townend's on board. Even if Paul wasn't riding him, I would still be fancying Cheltmental here. And I fully do respect Lossiemouth, but on all our RPRs, I don't think she's ever done higher than like a mid 150s. He's constantly running like high 160s. I don't think he's ever pushed 170, but like he's like 168s he's running. I think she's got 2, 3, 4, 5 pounds to find with Cheltman on what they've already shown up to now. And I know we've got to put a line through Cheltman's last run, but it was like a strangely run race, and it was a phenomenal performance from Brighter Days Ahead. So look, that isn't going to happen in this race. Lossiemouth's not going to go and burn them off. And I think they might try and do things with Lossiemouth to try and get her going. I don't know how else to say it other than the fact that how the hell is Cheltman 7-4? It's mind-boggling. Because if they were priced the other way around, you could probably start making a case for Lossiemouth, couldn't you? But that's the thing; they're not. I don't see how he's that price. So for that, very price-driven. But there's no way in the world anyone could talk me out of saying that Cheltman's not the only bet you could have in this race. But what do you think, Will? Is he the only bet you could have?
Well, I don't think it matters what I think after that, Dave. I think you could have persuaded even the most staunch Lossiemouth supporter there, perhaps. No, I think for me, it's. I'll put it straight in there. It's probably a no bet for race for me, no matter what the prices are, and that's purely personally, because I'm surprised he's not picked Lossiemouth. I really am, because I think she's the coming force. You know, she's the one who's supposedly improving. I think her last run, for all that it probably wasn't her on her absolute A game, it was a much better run than what Cheltman put in behind Brighter Days Ahead. I think the ground is quite important to Lossiemouth. I've sort of gradually formed this opinion that softish ground, and it will be soft ground, I think, because it's the hurdles course at Leopardstown, which is always a bit softer. I think that will suit her a bit more. And tactics of the race, I think, will be absolutely fascinating, because it, like you said, it won't be run at the absolute breakneck tempo like they did last time, where King of Kingsfield dragged Brighter Days Ahead into the race and nothing else could get into it. But interestingly, Cheltman's owner does have Daddy Longlegs in here. So what they do with that one, who at one stage was thought to be a horse that could potentially make it up into this kind of realm, I think they've realised he's not now. But is he in there to provide something for Cheltman, whether it be an even tempo, whether it be a stop-start tempo, whether it be a Lossiemouth spoiler, even though he's in the same yard? I don't know. And we don't know who's riding Lossiemouth yet either as well. That's not been clarified on the HRO website as yet. So, Paul Townend has been on Lossiemouth every race of her career bar one, which was Danny Mullins for her debut for Willie Mullins. So, just so many imponderables. Probably the most fascinating race of the whole weekend for me, because of what has happened in the recent past, and B, what might potentially happen in the near future with regards to targets at the Cheltenham Festival and other horses to throw into the mix for those two races, the Champion Hurdle and the Mayor's Hurdle as well. So, really excited by it. But I think right here, right now, I'm going to make the decision that I'm not going to have a bet in the race, because I'm still just, a bit of a mind melt with it.
It really is. And even with that, because it's not always the case with Willie Mullins when they declare the horses that they will confirm the jockeys straight away. And they do typically wait until they've sorted out the whole pecking order before they disclose it. Everything else of Willie Mullins that's been jocked up, apart from the bumper, have all been given like jockeys, or at least the pecking order has been like in the main sorted out. So with this race, it's just Paul Townend was on and they haven't decided the rest of it. This is purely conspiracy, not based on anything, but this is the way that my head thinks in races like this, again, to boost my excitement for the fact that even if Cheltman gets beat, I know I'm doing the right thing. I imagine they're just sat at Clasutton and they're arguing over who's going to ride it. And I think potentially there's an argument, because it may be that tactically they're going to do something with her. Maybe they even let her go and set the pace. I don't know whether that's the case, but they might be doing something tactically with her. And it may be that there's a bit of a dispute in the camp of what they should be doing with her, in terms of whether they should be riding her to run her best position or whether they should be trying something new. It's fascinating. But with all respect to the horse, the jockeys and everything, Danny Mullins on Lossiemouth would terrify me, because I think he's the type of one, when they do trial and error, like Manella Kakuna years back when they put the hood on him, he just goes and does what needs to be done. Like, I feel like he's ridden to instructions. Patrick, God love him, he's a good jockey, and he's like fantastic for the sport, but I feel like he maybe sometimes thinks he knows better, which again, that's me, conspiracy, and it's not based on anything. But if Patrick Mullins was on Lossiemouth, then I would be having more on State Man, is what my argument would be. And that is with the greatest respect to him, but State Man's a great bet. When they reform the markets, Will, I got a bit overexcited. I've bet him in the week anyway, took the risk. They've reopened the market 7-4. He did open up at 2-1, so I've had like a little bit more on. So all the staking of what I advise will go in the column for Sunday. But he shortened up a bit. He went down to 11-8 at Betfreeze's 5, and I was like, well, they've seen the jockey bookings now, haven't they? They've just made a mistake, and he's gone back out to 7-4. So the dust has settled to an extent. Yeah. In my head, I don't see a world where they don't go off like 11-10 joint favourites. And then I guess that's the question where the potential Lossiemouth fans from before would start looking at this thinking, well, she was 1-2. I can now get like 11-10, 6-4 about her. But that's where, like you've mentioned there, if you want to opt that it's potentially a no bet race, of course we can change. But sometimes it's helpful to do that, isn't it? Because when it gets nearer the time, you can get lured in by a price change. But then sometimes the reason they've gone out to a price is because the information's there for all to see, isn't it? Like, they're not necessarily going to go and win, but they'll both definitely be trying, wouldn't they? But they're not going to be trying anything new out with State Man, I don't think. Willie Mullins said it in his stable tour thing as well. He said, we'll push a few different buttons with her, all those types of things, all those types of buzzy words. I don't want to hear it going into race if I'm going to have a good bet on something. And that's the thing. If I fancied Lossiemouth and Lossiemouth was a price, those things would be a negative in my ear going into having a heavier bet on it. Whereas I feel, like I said, I feel confident that it's the right thing to do to bet State Man, and we're going to find out on Sunday whether we get paid or not, I guess. Right. We've still got 2 more races to go through, Will, so I'll try and waffle a little bit less. We've got a handicap hurdle over 2 miles. Listed handicap hurdle, this one is. And I think this could be fairly straightforward because Paul Townend doesn't often ride in the handicaps. He is riding Storm Heart here, and I know it's over hurdle, so obviously there's potentially less risk and all those types of things, which is maybe why he doesn't go over the fancy type stuff. But I liked this horse, Storm Heart, last season. He's probably the type of horse that I thought would have been doing bigger things already by this time of the season. So last year he was running in juveniles, wasn't he? Last time we saw him was May. The fact that they've kept him fresh for this, I don't know whether it's by design or not, but lots of Willie's horses have been making late starts, haven't they? They must have just realised, well, they must have known last year, wouldn't they, after that run behind Cargase in this spring juvenile, that he was a potential top-tier juvenile. He was sent off favourite for the Triumph, and for all that he ran poor there, he was then beat at Punchtown after, which almost kind of confused things, I guess, because he was a similar distance behind Cargase, and then you think, well, he maybe did run his race in Cheltenham then, and if he's run the same sort of level of form behind Cargase, so there was no excuses. But the fact that he's been held off a bit longer now, I'm more than happy to forgive him. And I think that, I think going into Cheltenham, if you said to me, or if you said to anybody, he's going to be rated 140 in sort of 9 months' time, I don't think anyone would believe you. They'd think he'd be pushing sort of the 150. So I fancy him. It's very difficult to get away from him. The only other horse that's sort of on my radar for this race, and I'm probably being ignorant because I'm just playing Storm Heart for the fact that I'm confident he's a better horse, and the jockey booking gives me some confidence. But James's Gate, I fancy this horse for the Coral Cup. This is a prize that is well worth winning still. It's like you say, with the other races, €88,000 to the winner. But Martin Brazil's been sending horses to the Coral Cup and been coming second on a few occasions. Now, it may be that the Mulrennans used to sponsor the Ballymore, and then they're not now, and maybe they don't want to have a runner on that day or a winner on that day. But I think James's Gate's a Coral Cup horse. This will get him qualified for that, which I think would be helpful. But I'm a little bit worried that I think he's a well-handicapped horse as well, so he might go in on Sunday. But they're the two that are on my radar. And again, like I said, I'm ignorant that I haven't gone too deep into the race because I feel like I could probably end up looking at another 10 horses and start making bits of cases for them. So anyone else that should be on the radar, Will, or do you, like me, fancy a couple of the shorter priced ones?
I must admit, I've had a good look at this race, actually, because it's the type of race I like. I think there's, lots of horses in here with potential to improve, and they will do through the spring as well. And I must admit, I if I was giving you something and said I was confident on it, I'd be lying, because it's a good race. I think it'll throw up, potentially lots of potential Cheltenham Festival handicap horses and horses for the Fairy House and Punchestown handicaps as well. But there wasn't anything right at this minute. You know, I'll keep going. I'll keep trying to find something. But I often find when I get into that theme of things, if I'm looking too deeply, then I need to say to myself, look, just stop looking. There isn't anything for you right here, right now. So I wouldn't be strong on too much, I must admit, right now. Plenty of interesting horses, though.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, there's 8 races to go out on the Sunday. Obviously, there's time to change between now and Sunday. So links in the description. You can check out what mine and Will's final picks are come race day. Right, we will move on to the curtain closer. I don't think that's the right phrase, but I'm going to coin a new one. It's the Mares Bumper. It's a Grade 2 race. Looks, even during the week, it looks like it was a race that Willie Mullins' Future Prospect was going to go off favourite in. Amen Kate's a horse that lots of people like. Just because it's, I guess, maybe not Willie Mullins is the reason why it's 4-1. Probably seems like a fair price considering how many people like this horse. There's Bambino Fever, Carrick-Morna Spruce in there too, Churchfield Sunset. The rest of them are all double figures in there, including Camelot Vega, the Camelot and Quavega baby. But this has been a race in the past, Will, that I've had a few fancies in it. The year that Lily de Burley won this, I can't remember the name of the horse, it's Spad, but I backed something else at like 40s, because I think that was the year when the first 3 or 4 home were all like 33s, 40s. It was a bigger field race back then. But I ran a bet saying they just got beaten ahead, Bob. But this has often been a race I've just looked at and just thought, look, it's the getting out stakes at the Dublin Racing Festival. Everyone gets really excited about Willie Mullins in the bumper. It's like the one to go and bet. But I've just always felt like, and it's not true that it will be at every year, but I've always felt like you're not guaranteed to have an absolute worldie in this race. And I think before we get to it, lots of people are really keen on trying to big up horses' form and get too excited about them. So it is a race that, unless I've seen something earlier in the season and I think that's the type of horse for it, I don't have an interest in it. And there hasn't been any of the bumpers from the mares that I've looked at this season where I thought that's the horse I think will go and win at the DRF. So again, probably being a little bit ignorant in it, it's just not a race I'd want to get involved in, because I think the market doesn't speak as truthfully about horses' chances as it does about just people with conspiracies like I like to sort of make up on some horses anyway. So I'm excited to see it. I do think on the basis of the form, Future Prospect deserves to be the favourite and could be the one that might shape into being a real nice special mare. But how did you see it? Have you got any sort of confidence in this race?
Not generally with bumpers, but I think sometimes they can be interesting betting mediums, because as you say, that there'll be whispers, there'll be, people with knowledge of the particular horses above and beyond what we've seen on the racetrack. So they can be informative betting events. But I did think that, look, if you think Future Prospect is the one, the chosen one for Willie Mullins and Patrick Mullins, then fair enough, priced up accordingly. Amen Kate, it was interesting that Patrick Mullins rode her on debut for Thomas Cooper. You know, he seems to be getting around, Patrick Mullins, to a few other stables and riding some decent bumper horses. Calypso Chance, who sadly we don't see on the Saturday, that was another one of them. But Willie Mullins obviously has a fair few mares in here, and the one that is probably overpriced, now whichever way you play it, whether it's each way outright or in a market without the favourite, was Blue Velvet, I thought, because she was very green when she won at Thurles on her bumper debut. She only beat an 80-1 shot by 3/4 of a length, so that might be why she's a big old price. But the horse she beat, Derryville, was beaten a similar distance by Bambino Fever, who's a good bit shorter a price actually in here, because that Bambino Fever win came at Punchestown. Probably it was thought that was a stronger event on New Year's Eve, but actually Blue Velvet beat the same horse on the run afterwards, so presumably that horse would have improved a little bit as well. So that was a potential angle in, but like I said, it's not, bumpers aren't usually something I go overboard with, and I'll just see how the market develops and see who's jocked up on. Oh, actually, I think Harry Swan might be looking at it. Yeah, Harry Swan is on Blue Velvet, which is a positive. I think he rides generally the Jigginstown #1 bumper horses, doesn't he? Whether they be for Gordon or whoever. So decent booking, horse that might be slightly overpriced, Blue Velvet.
Ooh, I like it. And I touched on that year where we had 33s, 40s or whatever. It does seem to be a race historically that, I mean, we've had a couple of good winners, but it does look a bit like a race where you do get a few surprises in there, don't you? So like I say, the getting out stakes should be long out the way. Just get it back on the champion hurdle. Please gamble responsibly. Right, away from Ireland, Will, I know we've taken up a lot of time in this one, but Musselburgh's on Sunday, some real good racing there. Was there anything you want the viewers to know well in advance that they need to be getting involved in?
Well, you've mentioned one horse that I've definitely got half an eye on, which is Clap of Thunder in that Scottish Supreme Novices Hurdle. I'm loath to say too much because I don't want any potential good price going west when the bookmakers price them first up. But because of he's been slightly disappointing this year, but I think there have been reasons for that and reasons to give him excuses for certain races. And it's meant that he's got a mark of 119. Now, he was due to run at Hereford on Wednesday or Thursday before that was abandoned in a handicap. But there's a couple of horses in here with marks already that are beyond Clap of Thunders. So I'm hoping that the layers just go down the route of let's take official ratings and let's price them up on there. Because I think Clap of Thunder is a potential 130 plus horse. And the ground will be better for him at Musselburgh as well. I think decent ground is important to him. So he could be a real player in that Supreme Novices, the Scottish Supreme Novices, as I say. And the Edinburgh National, I thought was a really good race, really interesting race as well. And the one that looks that could potentially be the most sort of suitable, the one that has perhaps been teed up for the race, and the one that might well be overpriced is Angler's Crag, last year's Ida Chase winner, who I don't think needs 4 and a bit miles and bottomless ground to be seen to best effect. For all that he won at Newcastle in the Ida, he's run plenty of good races around tight tracks over 3 miles on ground, good to softish. So I think he's just a good, just a rock solid good stayer who Brian Ellison knows he can get ready, and then whichever jockey's on board, he has just that extra bit of a turn of foot at the stage of a staying race that other horses don't have. And I think that could be the key factor here. I see one bookmaker, William Hill, have priced up the race now. He's 17-2, 4 places. If you could get anywhere around about that mark or even edging towards double figures, that would be an interesting bet, I think, for me.
Lovely. So that's Angler's Crag, and then it was Clap of Thunder in the Scottish Supreme, right? I've just had a message from someone who's keeping an eye on the horse racing Ireland stuff, and he said that Patrick's on Lossiemouth. So breaking news, although the video will be up and you'll be watching it much farther after. But everything I said about that champion hurdle race, like I said, I'd be fearful if Danny Mullins was on board. I've got no qualms in it. Doesn't mean that I'm right and I've got it right. It's going to go and win, and good horses can get beaten, all that sort of stuff. But I'm very content now, Will. The 7-4 about the Stateman. It could be like the Meeting of the Waters type horse, couldn't it? Where, like, from a price perspective, we know we're putting this preview out and the price may be gone. The fact that he's holding up a little bit, well, viewers can make their own mind up. That's the beauty of all of this, right? And especially when it gets to that level of it as well, different stuff in terms of like handicaps or different types of lower grade races, you might have to have a bit more, expertise in those. But when it's just the top horses running against each other, the grade, especially the grade ones, that's why meetings like this are so good, because it lets average Joe off the street come in and see, because you would say 99 out of 100 grade 1 runners are running 100%, because why would you not be trying to win a grade 1? So when they're straight as a bat, it's much easier, isn't it? Oh, go on, State Man. Right, I'll leave it there because I could waffle on for even longer, Will. There's a good few fancies for everyone in this Sunday preview anyway. As I say, there'll be a link in the description for our daily tips. You can click that. You can see that during the week when Will's got some fancies, and then I'm normally sort of Thursday to Sunday, as long as there's some good stuff about. But they'll be updated this weekend. Good luck if you do follow us in, and thank you guys for the support. Have a good weekend.